Hey guys, hope everybody's doing great today. I think my mic is working. Gonna go no music today. I don't know why. Maybe because my Spotify doesn't like me. But that's okay. I hope everybody's doing great today. Welcome to the show. Today we're gonna look at how to create a form in React or fail at it miserably, but it's a start. You guys say hello in the comments if you guys are on, if you could hear me or see me. Let me know because a lot of times I'm not sure if my stream is even working. But it's going to be a lot of fun as always. As always, a lot of fun. I just keep saying that every stream, and every stream it happens to be fun. That's so funny. I hope you guys doing great, but let me just make sure that everything is working. Make sure that let me know if you guys could see me or hear me, because I've done a bunch of streams where I come on and I do my whole spiel. I talk for God knows how long. And then when I come back and I realize, I'm like, wow, I'm not even recording right now. And that's usually hilarious. But if you guys doing wonderful, if you guys could see me, we have a great show for you tonight, talking about creating forms in React. I think that's exciting. And, you know, it'll be a lot of fun. So let me know how you guys are doing. Let me know if you guys could hear me, see me. That'll be perfect. In the meantime, let me go share this wonderful stream on Twitter for those who are interested. It'll be a lot of fun. Yeah, anyway, I hope with you guys are doing good. I know with a lot of crazy stuff, going on in the world, that we could do what we can. And the most important thing to do is, if we're able to, is, continue to work, continue to move forward. Um, you know, but anyway, with that being said, today I wanted to showcase the application that we started building. I want to definitely go over how to make a basic form and how to provide simple authentication. And for authentication, we're going to use Strapi. In my opinion, Strapi is one of the best ways to set up an API really, really quickly. So I pretty much use it for all my projects. And I'll walk you guys through the code if you're new here. You could also get all this on my GitHub if you guys are interested. I'll leave it in the description below after the stream. You guys will be able to grab the code. But with that being said, let me just again make sure my audio is working. Everything is working. Um, just gonna add a little link on Twitter to be like, hey, let's have some people join us. And yeah, and otherwise we'll keep going. Let me know again in the comments if you guys could see me, if my stream is working. I'd like to know before I get too deeply involved in what it is we're doing. But today we're gonna talk about basic forms, right? Very simple forms. And we're gonna talk about how to set up a basic form and add authentication. What's up, Alex? So Alex is here. What up, what up? Let me know if everything works. I know my internet here is a little bit weird because I'm visiting my family, but, show goes on. Look, I appreciate you guys so much. I wore my best shirt ever for you guys. But today we're going to talk about, so what is the stream about? By the way, those of you guys who are here, the stream, the Tuesday night stream for me is very important, this concept of building your own projects from scratch. The reason why I like to talk a lot about building projects from scratch is because I feel it's the best experience you guys can get. So forget tutorial hell. If you've been doing tutorials on Udemy, they're perfect. They're a great way to start. But after at most 4 tutorials, you got to get out there and start building your own projects. It's hard, right? It's tough, but that's what we got to do. And last stream I had Luke on my stream and we talked about a lot of great stuff. So if you missed that stream, definitely check it out. It was last week's stream. One of my best streams ever. A lot of great information, a lot of great gems. But most importantly, at one point, on the stream, he demonstrated his project that he was building. It's a project that he's been building from scratch. And here's the thing. If you're building your project from scratch through failure, through figuring things out, through reading up on the documentation, you're going to know that code in and out. And that's exactly what Luke demonstrated. Is he was able to show his code, and no matter where I point my finger, it's like if it's a globe and I roll it and I press my finger randomly, it'd be like, explain me this code. He was able to explain that code. He knew exactly what the code did, what he was talking about. And this is why it's important for me to constantly encourage you guys to build your own projects from scratch. And today we're going to work on how to build a basic form, talk about basic authentication. And for my backend, I'm using Strapi because, in my opinion, it's the easiest way to set up an API, especially if you're starting out. But at the same time, as you get more advanced, it's flexible enough to allow you guys, and you'll see this in much later streams, how to customize the backend to get the functionality that you want. But at the same time, you don't have to because it's easy to get started. So we're going to talk about building a form with React. And I like this. Alex says I have a nice shirt. This is the only shirt I have. I got to get more. I think shirts are nice to wear, change it up a little bit, and I put the sweater on just when I get hot, I could take it off and be like, hey, look at this. But anyway, so this is an application I started to work. So Strapi 4 came out. And so our previous application, we were building Dev Hunt. I had to put on the pause because it was built with Strapi 3, and I am waiting for the time to get more documentation on how to convert an application from Strapi 3 to Strapi 4. But I did start using Strapi 4, and I started a new application. And here's the thing that I'm going to say to you guys before we get into this form example, is that if you're building an application, one of the most important things is that it has to look good. And sometimes we feel that we have to build everything from scratch. I'm not saying don't learn HTML and CSS. Actually, you have to learn HTML and CSS. But the point that I'm saying, if you're building a project for your portfolio, and if you saw my Dev Hunt project, and I'll actually show it to you guys here on the screen for a second. And on that project, I wasn't so much concerned with the presentation as I was with the functionality of the application. And so let me quickly show you this application here. And it doesn't look bad, but if you're starting out and you're working on projects and maybe you don't have the best design, or you don't even have time to create your CSS from scratch, right? You could use something like Bootstrap or Tailwind or what have you, and you could make your application look somewhat nice. I mean, it's not like super ugly, right? Like, it looks okay. But what you could also do, and this is something I suggest, if you're building a cornerstone application, and this doesn't look too bad, and this was our Dev Hunt project that we were building, and it's not bad because we are using Bootstrap and React Bootstrap, so it gives us some sort of consistency of what we're doing. But you could go one step farther and you could get yourself a template. And I got one from Tailwind. I'm not saying you guys should get the template from Tailwind, but I'm just going to show it to you. And it wasn't cheap. One day you wake up and you have impulse buy. So some people go to the bar or whatever and do crazy stuff. I went crazy and I bought this marketing template, and they just introduced an e-commerce template from Tailwind. And so you don't have to buy from Tailwind. They have all these amazing other sites like ThemeForce and what have you. But look at this amazing Tailwind template, and look how amazing it looks. It has lots of great examples, and you're able to get code snippets, and you're able to kind of use the code in your project. And the only reason I say this is because if you're building something by yourself, and you obviously need to know HTML and CSS. If you don't know HTML and CSS, please hear me out. You need to learn it, and you have to make sure you build few projects with your own HTML and CSS skills. But to kind of work faster and get your idea to market faster, it's okay. And I would also argue, if you're looking to have the best looking portfolio ever, it's okay to use templates to help you out build your application faster. And so here's my application. This is based on that Tailwind template that I showed you, and you could see that it already looks professional. And this actually is deployed. If you want to check it out, I'll put it here on the link. And our backend is obviously using Strapi, because Strapi is amazing. I know people could argue with me all day long, but this is our new application we're building. We're building a Teams manager, because I used to talk about bug tracker this, bug tracker that, but the truth is Code Foundry did an amazing job talking about the bug tracker. That was their idea. That was the one project to rule them all. So I don't want to completely copy them, because they're already doing and building a bug tracker. So we're going to build a team manager, and this is already live. This is the front end. Today we're going to talk about how to make the functionality for the form. Very simple idea to be able to, we'll try to build a form from scratch. We'll see, maybe we'll fail, but I'll show you the code first. To have you guys do basic authentication, and obviously for our API, because it's so easy to get started, we're going to use Strapi. By the way, I've been working with Strapi for a while now, and I am every day amazed at the level of customization, at the level of backend customization you are able to do. But this is kind of the nice, beautiful form we have here, and you could actually log in. And if you go to the live site here, I do have an account here. It's test user, very original, at email.com. And right now there's not that much functionality, but you're able to log in and you're able to see the basic layout. And again, because I'm using a theme, I'm using a template, I'm using Tailwind template to be more particular, it looks beautiful, it looks professional, really nice. So at least one thing I know, I'm not going to be questioned on the design purposes of it. And when people go to look at my application, they're going to be able to really not get deterred by its unattractiveness, and they're really going to appreciate the code that's underneath. Because one of the things that I learned, which is unfortunate, when your application doesn't look as pretty on the front end, people never look at the code underneath. Like, they never make it that far ahead to take a look at what the functionality of the code you wrote, because they're kind of basing everything on this first impression of your application. So this application is deployed. Currently, we're working on the login feature and logout feature. Then we're going to work next on the sign up feature and go from there. And those of you guys who are kind of wondering what our goal, before we jump in and look at the form, let me quickly say hello here. We have Joanna here on the stream. Web Dev Junkie, what's up, brother? Good to see you. We have Horace. What's up, man? Good to see you. And you know, the usual crowd is here. So before we build this form, the most important thing I kind of wanted to mention, that anytime you guys are building something, it's very important to have some sort of planning or planned out thing. And I think I saved it here in the bug tracker. We'll see. The truth will come out. Where is it? I don't remember where I saved it. You go figure. No. No, this is different. This also has a form and kind of talk about the functionality, but that was a different application. Let me figure out where else. Maybe I saved it on the community project. Looks familiar, but again, that's not it. Maybe developers roadmap. I saved it here. No, I did not. So I am drawing a blank where I saved it, but basically I'll just use this as an example, but because this is actually very similar to what we're doing, is that before you build out your application, it's important to have some sort of plan in place. So we have a login page. If you have an account, you should be able to log in. If you don't have an account, you should go to registration, and then you kind of map out the steps that you want people to be able to take to be able to add that functionality. So if we look at our application, not this one we'll come back to at a later date. We're building a new application. We're building this Teams manager, and if you look, we kind of have that same exact flow that I just showed. We have this ability. You could either sign in, and if you don't have an account, you could sign up. And currently we're going to be working on creating the sign-in form to help us work. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this particular form in code and how I implemented it. And again, I'm using Tailwind. I'm going to kind of explain to you everything I did. And then what we'll do, we'll build a simple form and see if we could get it to work. And if, by the way, if you guys have any questions about anything, let me know. We could talk about it. It just doesn't have to be me talking to the screen. So let me kind of walk you through my how much progress I made so far. So let me close all this for now. So this application is built with a React. I have my components folder, and let me make this bigger. I have my components folder, which has all of my components for this particular application. I decided to use context, and we have global context to basically where we're able to save all of our state into context, and that state also, let me scroll up here, uses this use local storage hook to save all of our data to local storage. So that way, you know, if let's say you're doing a form and you're halfway done and you entered your information and you accidentally, you know, move away to a different website by accident, or you click back button by accident, when you come back, we want to have a nicer user experience where we save that information in local storage that it could populate the form when you're back. And so this is what we're going to use our context for. And of course, I could have went with Redux, but argument that I would make for you guys, if you're starting to learn React, is start to understand how all the native React features work first before you start adding third-party libraries. And so that's our context. Moving down in our folders here, I have helpers functions where any function that I'm going to reuse somewhere that does a specific thing, I just stick it into this folder. I have my hooks folder because I'm really like using hooks, and I have two hooks here. First, I have this use local storage hook, and basically what it does is just whatever I pass inside here, it will store in local storage, and then it'll allow me to retrieve the data and to use it to populate context with it. And then I have use fetch mutation, which is a weird name because I really like GraphQL, and I really how they have use mutation and use query. And so what I decided to do is to kind of create this obfuscation, as you will, where I have this general use fetch mutation where I basically could pass the URL. I get a callback function where I could pass my options, and it's basically, you know, the data that I want to send with whatever other goes into that. And that allows me to, whenever I want to update, do like post or update or put, I could just call this callback function. And I'm using this hook in my form, and I'm going to show you that in a second. And if you have questions about anything, don't be shy. Let me know, because I am here for you guys, not just for me talking about the code that I wrote. And then we are going to make a basic form, but I just want to kind of give you the idea. Next, we have our pages, and we have our dashboard, our home page. This is where all of our authentication is. And we basically have two different forms. We have sign-in form and we have a sign-up form. So we're going to go to our sign-in form. That's not the one. Here you go. I clicked the wrong button. Go to definition. And so first I'm going to give you like a quick overview of kind of what I did and why I did it. And we'll go through every function little by little. And again, I like making and putting everything into React components. And under the hood, I'm using Tailwind. And what I'm doing is I'm creating and styling these components with Tailwind. For instance, you could see this input component that I built. You could go to the definition, and you could see that I'm using styled components to style my UI. And I have this library called Tailwind style components, which allows me to put Tailwind classes inside styled components here, which makes it very easy for me to basically style my UI. And if you guys have more questions about this, I could definitely answer them. And this is my generic input component that I'm basically calling from my form. And the reason why I wanted to make this generic input component, because now I could use it many times. I could use that same input component for the get the email, and I could use the same input component to get the password. Okay, and so basically what happens when you come to this form, right, and you enter information here and you click sign in, basically when you enter the information, you enter the, let's say your email, is gonna fire this handle on input change, and that handle on input change is going to basically take the value that you're typing in and add it into our form state. So we have our form state here. And we do the same thing with the password, right? We basically get that value and add it to our form state. Once you click, I do have unblur here, and for not to confuse anybody, I'm just going to give you a quick idea. Whenever you leave, unblur basically fires whenever input loses focus. So I'll show you what I mean. So let me just make this empty. So notice whenever I leave and it loses focus, I hate this autocomplete, it's messing. But whenever you lose focus, let me refresh. I don't know why my autocomplete automatically adds the form. Let me do this. I hate Chrome, the fact that it, Firefox, the fact that my autocomplete is always crazy. But I'll show you what I mean. So what unblur does, for instance, whenever you click into the field and it loses focus, unblur will fire that command. And so basically what it's doing, whenever you leave the field, it will go to our validation function. So validate identifier basically tests to see, you know, this is very basic logic, but it tests to see well, this is not too basic, but it uses regex to check if the email format that you provided is correct. And I have the same concept here on blur. Whenever you type in your password, right? Let's say you type in your password and you leave, it's going to fire some sort of validation, which is going to fire this validate password function, which will basically do a simple validation test to check if the password length is less or equal to 6. If so, there's an error because you want to make sure that you provide a password that's longer than 7 characters, wherever it is, but it's basically basic validation. So the template that, and the way that I like to set up my forms is to follow this kind of template. So the first thing I do is I create my initial form state. So for initial state, we have identifier, which is our email, and we have our password, and that's going to be empty. And I'm not good at Tailwind. You must be jumping in late because I basically bought a template and Tailwind does it for me. And that's kind of like the argument I was making, saying how sometimes investing in a template could go a long way to have a very professional looking presentation for your application. But I'm not an expert at Tailwind, but for me, like I really do enjoy it. I really like it. And Anna says the same thing. See how much credit I'm getting for the work that I didn't do. So this is a template from Tailwind. Now this one was fairly expensive. I bought it when I was not in the right state of mind, and so now I'm trying to use it on my application because I did spend a bunch of money. But the point that I'm trying to say is that you don't have to buy this particular template, but find a component library, find a UI library, or a template that you find on ThemeForest that basically has, like, basically I'm not paying for the fact that this is using Tailwind. I literally paid for the fact that they have this beautiful design, and what I'm able to do is get the code and be able to just utilize it. Now, obviously, what I'm doing is I'm doing a lot more work. Like, for instance, I hate that Tailwind has these crazy long lines of, like class attributes. And this is kind of the example I was showing you in my code, where I decided to get this package called Tailwind style Tailwind components. And what I'm doing, instead of, like, if you look at my code here, look, this doesn't look ridiculous. I don't have miles long, HTML tags, not tags, but like class name attributes. Because what I'm doing, and I'll show you this input again as a example, is that I took all the Tailwind class names and I wrapped them and put them inside a styled component. And basically what this allows me to do is not have this code in my JSX, but it's kind of hidden because I'm using it in my style components. And the reason why I like this is one day if I decide to change the styling, I could just go in one place, change it here, and it will propagate throughout my whole application where these styles are used, rather than changing the class names in the HTML like you see in Tailwind here. Imagine like if you have a button with different styles and Tailwind in a bunch of different places, and you have all these class names here, you're going to have to go to every place and change things around. But we'll come back to the form, but I just wanted to kind of show you kind of what we talked about. And again, I showed you how we have that validation. So if I provide, correct like email format test.email, and I click off that component, again, it fires that on blur like I showed you in our code here, right? Whenever we hit that on blur, it will fire our validation function, which checks the validation and updates it accordingly. And we could talk about more in detail. I'm just kind of flying through this to kind of give you an idea. And then I also have our main form validation that gets fired on submit, and I'm passing the previous two functions to check the data. For instance, if I'm here and I refresh and I click sign in, notice how hey, you didn't provide the right data, and it fires that validation. So again, to sign up, I have to make sure that I add the appropriate data and appropriate password to continue. So somewhere I entered the wrong password, testuser@email.com, or testuser@email, test user, sign in. I can't type, so let me just copy and paste, because I know this account exists. I probably broke it. Attention needed, invalidated. So I'm entering I know why. I know why this is happening, because I think this is running on my local host. That's why local hosts have different user. Let me go to the deployed version here. So here's the deployed version. And I'll do again. You could all navigate to this website. I put a link in the comments, and once everything validates, it's going to log you into our application. And again, a lot of people saying this looks beautiful. And again, I can't take all the credit because I just bought a theme to make my design process go much faster. So a lot of people want to build everything from scratch. And I think when you're learning, it's important to know HTML, CSS. It's important to know how everything fits together. But then when you're looking to deploy an application and you want to bring your idea to the market, if you're going to take every little piece and build it yourself, it's just going to take forever and you'll never get there. So if you're building a project for your portfolio, pick one thing that you want to focus. Like, I really want to focus on my functionality and my code. I don't really care for the UI. Then get a beautiful template and put it on and work. So here we go. Let's kind of talk about this. So here's our form validation function that fires when we call handle submit. So let's kind of go through this. So the first thing that happens is we fire this form validation function on submit, which will basically check if we have email and valid password. If there are no errors, it will basically call this function here, and this is called login payload, and I'll show you where it's coming from. It's coming from the use hook that I created, use fetch query, whatever I decided to call it, and it kind of mimics the way GraphQL use query works, but it's not using GraphQL, it's using fetch. And basically what I do is I pass the method type post, I pass the header and the data that I want to send. And login, let's come back here to see what it is. That's what let me go back here. That's what I call the function. Wait a second. I lied to you a little bit. Okay, so let me back up here, not to confuse you. I confused myself. So login payload, I basically made an object and I put the method, the header definition, and the body inside of it, just so I could pass it in here like this into my use fetch query hook, which I'll show you in a second again. I could have just as easily, done this like this, and that would work just as fine. But to me, this kind of looks hard to read. And so I like to sometimes to separate stuff where, I put everything into one variable, and then I have my function and I put that thing in there. So login, and this could be called whatever I want, but I created this use fetch mutation hook, and what it does, it returns a callback function, and it also returns loading, error state, and data. And if you worked with GraphQL, this is very similar to what the use query hook looks like. And because I'm so familiar with it, I decided to make a use fetch mutation hook to allow me to handle any post request or any update or put request easily. And I'll kind of go into the hook just to show you quickly. And we're not going to make a form as complex. We'll do something simple, but I just wanted to give you a walkthrough to kind of get an idea. And you could see my use fetch mutation hook, which basically all it does under the hood, it just uses fetch to pass the URL that I want and pass the options, which is the header information, the data, and what have you, and we'll basically do a fetch response and return that data. And as you could see in my return, I'm returning my callback function here, and I'm also returning the data state, the loading state, and the error state, and that way I have access to it similar to what use mutation hook does in GraphQL. And again, if you guys get too confused, ask questions, because sometimes I'm still confused, you know what I mean? And so basically what happens when we do handle form submit, it will basically take that payload and it will call our login mutation or our use hook form, that hook that I created, pass the payload and do everything here. And on top here, we have a use effect. And basically, use effect here will listen and check if data changes, meaning that if I get a response, meaning that I'll get the JWT token and user response, if that happens, we call it dispatch, and it's our login action, and we basically push our JW token and user. And what this dispatch is coming from, it's coming from my global contacts where I'm using use reducer to kind of keep track of all my states. So let me quickly show you this. So if we go back to, and again, guys, don't be shy, ask questions. I'd love to answer more questions about what we're doing before we build our simple form here. So let me close this. Why is this node modules folder open? Like, look how much scrolling I have to do. That's so unnecessary. Let me close this here. So if we go to the source, we go to context, and we go to our global context, you could see that I have a reducer that takes a bunch of actions, and I have global context here, and I have context that returns dispatch. that basically allows me to dispatch an action from our to our reducer, and we also have access to our regular state provider, access to our state provider. And then I created an extra provider that I didn't hook up yet, which I'm probably not going to use, so I could actually delete it. But I wanted to maybe have fetch teams and fetch team users coming from contacts. But because I have that, I'm going to have that use query data hook. Do I really need to have it in contacts? Or could I just use the use hook? And I think that's what I'm going to do. For now, I'm going to leave it here because it's not breaking anything yet, but I'll revisit that later. So coming back to our form, basically, let me just clean this up again. The pattern that I like to follow. And we're going to create a simple version of this in just a second. But I just want to kind of set the mood, as you will. No, I'm like so slow at closing things because I want to give you an overview. So basically, I build a form, right? We have, in this form, we have two inputs, one for the email, one for the password. And we have on change here, where whenever anything changes in the input, we'll basically take whatever that value is and set it to our set form data. And then afterwards, I have some basic validation functions that allow us to do some simple validation before we submit the form. And then on handle form submit, we check if we have errors. If we don't have any errors, we basically go ahead and fire this login function, which is basically under the hood is the basic fetch request. And I basically obfuscated that through this use fetch mutation, which in our example that we're about to do in a minute, we're not going to go this wild, but I just did it this way. And then it'll return back our data, which will have our JWT token and user information. And if we do have that data, that means we successfully logged in. So let's go ahead and do something. And in this case, we're saving that to our contacts. Now I have, and we'll come back here. Let me look at the stuff here. And Web Dev Junkie, I know this is from a while ago, but he was saying, shh, don't show them the coding cheat sheets. Yeah, like all the secrets of what we do. Basically buy a professional theme and use it to make your application look nice. You don't have to, but it does help. Hologram, what's up? Good to see you. And Anna's asking, is this on GitHub? And she did say your code looks nice too. Lol, thanks. I love all the compliments. And so, yes, it is on GitHub. And let me actually go share that link for you guys so you guys could see. And I have both the front end and back end on GitHub, and our back end is using Strapi. And we'll take a look at it in just a second. But I'm going to put a link again for the repo if you guys could go ahead, and it's a public repo. You could, and this is the front end, you could pull it, you could do npm install, you could run it, and that is amazing, right? You have access to that. So basically what we're going to do, we have this, I created this random form which has nothing in it. And so what we're going to do, we are going to build our basic form for us to actually do validation that we're going to kind of do against our Strapi API. And I have Strapi API deployed here. This is actually where you could set up your users, your teams, whatever. And it provides already out of the box controllers that allow us to basically do basic authentication. For instance, if I'll show you here, if I go to user permissions, they have this amazing plugin that already has authentication out of the box. So we could go ahead and we could register an account, register a user. Register, by the way, is the one that comes out of the box. But the cool thing about Strapi, for instance, you could go ahead and you could make a, we're actually going to use sign in, connect in this, but since I'm already talking about the registered user is a custom controller that I extended because Strapi allows to do that to add additional functionality. And Nash13 says, yes, can you tell me what the best safe way to store JW token? There's many opinions on the topic. Your thoughts, please. Yes, there's many opinions on the token, and my answer will be really quick. You have to understand that there's private JW token, and then there's public-facing JW token. The JWT token that I'm getting back from the Strapi API, it's supposed to be passed to the front end, so that token is okay and perfectly safe to store in your local storage. Now, there are cases where that's not the case, but if you look at all the authentications that you see which pass a front-facing token, it means that it's supposed to be a publicly facing token. So there's not that much security risk if you're using it appropriately. But yes, so many people have many discussions about this, and I guess we could spend many lifetimes talking about that. But just understand that there's certain tokens, like in this case, getting JW token for our front end, it's perfectly fine. Because here's the thing: if I have this token, the reason why I have it is because I need to pass it with my request. So regardless, when I get that token, there's still going to be a check on the back end, which will check, does the token match the token that I need to use? And you could also do additional validation on the back end that will allow you to kind of keep your app secure. But this topic is very complex. So very good question. Thanks for asking. And like I said, we could talk about this topic forever. But going back to our code. So what we're going to do, we're going to build our basic authentication form similar to this one. And again, I'm not going to rebuild this one because I already have it. I just showed you the code. And plus, you want to use this as a learning opportunity or watch me fail opportunity, right? A lot of times it's like, damn, let's watch Paul fail. So this is our random form. Right now, I don't really have anything here. And we're not going to worry about styling it here. But this is going to be our random form. And I created a route for it. Let me close all the stuff that I'm no longer using. React app. I created a route for it at random form. So if we go to this route, look, we have our random form. Nothing's happening here. And so I am not going to worry about too much styles right now. So let me make this a little bit bigger. Bigger screen here so we could see a little bit easier. So the first thing that I like to do is to create the actual form with my HTML, right? So we're going to make a form tag. Damn, brain farts left and right. And we're going to have a couple of inputs. Now, I could go ahead, right? I could go ahead and do, you know, my label, my input, but then I would have to make that input twice, meaning, you know, if I were to do an input here like this, I'll use the regular, and I can't type fast. If you guys think that developers have to type fast, what am I doing here? Self-correct. It's not true. I mean, some of them type really fast. Maybe, you know what? Forget it. I'm like super slow. And hello, Northern Jim. Good to see you. And Nash says, thanks for the reply. You're welcome. I hope that was helpful. Half the time, I don't give helpful advice, but I try my best. And then you could do input. You could do name. And the reason why we're using name is because you're going to use it to identify the field that we're trying to get a data from. And then we could do, you know, type if you wanted to. It's going to be text, actually email, to give us just standard validation that comes with basic HTML. You could also put like, we could do placeholder, which will be email. You could also type required here, and notice how we have our email here. I guess required, it's not going to do anything because we do want to have a submit button. So I'm going to go ahead here and make a button. And if you make button type submit, why am I doing it like this? Why did I decide to press enter so many times? But when you have the button submit, and you have on submit handler, which will do some function. For now, we're just going to say alert, right? Alert. Hey, hey, hey. And so basically now what will happen whenever I hit this submit button is going to fire this on submit button. So let's check it out here. So I click submit, and notice how it says please include at email address, blah, 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 blah. So it's basically giving you pre-built email validation that we already have access to. And this is because I put this required field. So for today's form, while we're starting out, we are going to use required, but we could do our own personal validation. But required, that's not how you spell required. But for now, we're going to keep it like this. So notice if I don't provide proper value, it's not going to submit the form. If I do test.email.com and click submit, it says, hey, 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 right? Because that's what the form should say when you submit it. So we have our email, and then we could do the magic of copy and paste, and we could do another thing here. I wanted to, what? Shift Alt F. No. Okay, I want to keep it on separate lines. And so we have our input here. This is going to be password, right? Password. And then type is going to be password. You guys get the idea. Password. And then the placeholder is going to be password. And password is required. So for instance, if I don't add anything for the email and click submit, it says please add email. If I don't put anything for password, I hit submit, it says please fill out the field. And this is the easiest way to add validation, albeit basic validation. Is just put required on your inputs. So if I put my password, hit click submit, it's going to say hey, 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 it's going to submit that fantastic form. And so before I continue, what use Immer? So Immer allows you to, and I'll come back to this, remind me if you're still on the stream, but basically, you know how whenever you work with state in React, you cannot modify the original state, right? You need to make a copy of that state because it's not mutable. Well, Immer allows you to basically, what it does, it creates a copy of your state, so then you can modify it, so you could directly edit it. So if I wanted to, I'll come back to that just because I'm like already involved in the form, but it's pretty good actually. Just check out their package, and that sounded weird. And then you'll learn more about it. But basically what I'm doing here, I'll show you real quickly. Never mind, I'll show you quickly. I'm not going to go too far into details. Now, by the way, guys, the reason why I keep telling you guys build stuff from scratch yourself is because I don't know if it's comfortable, but look how comfortably I feel like I could talk about the code that I wrote. And if I am sounding confusing about certain portions of it, maybe I don't know it well enough. So that's another great way and why you should code yourself instead of doing tutorials. 4 tutorials is enough. Like 4 courses on Udemy, that's more than you need. But the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm easily now able to talk about my code and seem like a professional. So we were talking about use Immer reducer, and what this allows me to do is to here. So use Immer reducer. Let me see where it's at. So basically what it does, it allows me to pass in my reducer and data that, or state. And if you look at this reducer here, notice how here I'm straight up mutating data. If I was not using Immer, this would not be the way to do this, right? So Immer basically allows you to mutate your state directly because this is not original state, it's a copy of a state. So it's perfectly fine for me to go ahead and mutate it. Now, if I was doing this non-Immer way, it would be, something like, I would destructure state because you're not allowed to mutate it. I would destructure state, and then I would add my, action payload or whatever. But now I don't have to do that. I could straight up mutate it directly, because I'm not directly mutating state, because this is not original state, but copy. And that's basically what useImmer allows you to do. It allows you to have easy copy of state. So then you could go ahead and do stuff like this, where I'm directly mutating it, although I'm not, because this is a copy of the state and not the original state. I hope that made sense, but let's come back to our show. So random form. So we got this far. So I was kind of talking about using required for simple validation here. So if everything is great, it works. And if you delete whatever stuff here, it will ask for validation. Now, the issue here now, nothing happens, right? We're not getting the data from Yeah, and so, 100% you could use, and I really love Redux Toolkit. I think they did a phenomenal job. And yes, you could definitely go ahead, use Redux, and in certain situations, like especially if you're working on a massive application, that's actually a better way. So my argument initially, I'm not sure if you heard it, was basically if anybody's starting to learn React, make sure you first get comfortable using its native features. So learn to work with contacts, learn to use a user reducer hook, use state, and use effect, and all that other great stuff. Once you're comfortable with it and you understand what you can do, and eventually you would hit limitations of what the context API could do, and then you could go ahead and learn Redux Toolkit. And by the way, Redux Toolkit is awesome, and that was actually a really good question. And so that's kind of, my recommendation is to make sure that the native features of React first before you start adding third-party functions, because you don't want to be at a point where you're like, is Redux part of React? I mean, when I first started learning React, I thought that. I didn't know any better. So, all right. So now basically what we want to do is we want to create and save our input state. And we could easily do that by adding a value prop here. And we could do this on individual basis, where we could say function here, and it would kind of set email, and we pass, damn it, autocorrect. Where's the bracket missing? Oh yeah, set email doesn't exist, and it wouldn't be like this. It would be E, and you would not be passing set email. You will be passing e.target.value, right? And then here you would have your state const, email. And you could do it individually. I'm not saying that you should, but I'm just going to show you this example first. Equals React use state, or you could just import use state and not worry about it here. I just hate that I can't type to save my life, and it's because I just don't know how to type. And so now, and it's not going to be here, guys. I lied to you guys. Here it's going to be our email, our actual value, but on change, that's where you want to fire your send email function. And then what we're going to do, we're going to copy this, or we don't have to copy this. We could just do value, and that's going to be equal to password, right? And then I'll show you another way of doing it in just a second. And I change set password equals either target.value, and then we do const password set password. And so when this form loads, initially we're going to have our empty string, so empty state. Man, thanks so much. Yeah, I'm doing good. Just been so busy with work and all this other stuff, and it's just been crazy. So that's why I haven't been doing any other videos outside of live streaming, because live streaming is just easier for me, because you just jump on and do it. Not the best strategy on YouTube, but dude, so busy with work, so much stuff going on. Yeah, I know it's been forever, but I'm glad to see you here. I hope you're doing good. I hope you're working on cool stuff. And so, we have our advertisements here. Fantastic. Always nice to get spammed by bajillion advertisements, but that's fine. So now basically what we're doing is we're setting on change, we're setting whatever the value in this field using e.target.value, we're setting it to state, and we could console log our state here. Email and password. So now if I go here to our form, let me clear this errors, refresh. And so now if I delete this, notice how my state changes, right? That's a good sign because that means we have what we need to be able to have state. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and create a function here called function handle submit. Again, we're gonna do like a super easy example. And Anna, you're killing me. I can't spell to save my life. Password is spelled wrong. I don't, you know what? I'm not even surprised. Like, I can't spell to save my life password. At least it's password and not like misspelled like this. Like it'll be like hilarious. Oh, what's that? That's my password. And so we have our password looking good. Let me close this to give our more real estate. So now basically we have our handle submit, and we want to do event prevent default. It'll basically prevent the default functionality of the form, which is basically when you submit a form, it will refresh the page. We do not want that with React. And so right now I'm going to not do console log. I'm going to alert. So alert will basically go ahead and show us that we submitted the form. And what we're going to do, we're going to create an object which is going to be a data that we're going to send to our API. And just trust me on this because I already know it. Our API expects an identifier, which will be our email field, and then it expects password, which will be perfect. And then we're going to do some code here, whatever, that's going to send this data. But for now, I'm just going to show that data. And what is it? We could do JSON, stringify JSON dot stringify to, I think, to see the data on form submit. So now we have our handle submit. And what we want to do is put our handle submit function here so it gets called on our form submit. So quick review, we set up our two input fields, and we'll do some quick refactoring to this form as well. And we have an onChange that basically gets the value. And again, we did it this way, but I'll show you another way in just a moment. And then we have our, let's see here. We have our handle submit, which will basically take our data in our form, and we're going to write some function that's going to handle that sign-in logic in a second. But for now, let's test what we have here. So if I don't enter anything, because we use required, it's going to do that simple validation. So I'm going to do paul@email.com test user. And now when I click submit, notice it says form submitted. And JSON stringify, that should work, right? Let me do console log here because I'm console log data. I thought that should work. So yeah, we have our identifier password. Is it JSON stringify? Like, my mind is losing me. What do you guys do? JSON stringify. I think that should have showed it in console in the alert. Oh, maybe alert doesn't allow you to do. Yeah, that's correct. Stringify is correct. I think what I'm not allowed to do is to pass multiple items here. I just need to do this like this. And so let's try it again. Okay, submit. And yes, and perfect. Now you see the data that we're passing. So this is great. So our first part of the form is done. And obviously we could do some refactoring, which we'll come back to in just a minute. Let me see how we're doing on time here. And by the way, if you guys haven't smashed the button, you don't have to smash the button. You don't have to. You know what I mean? But if you're going to do it, if you're going to smash the button, you guys are definitely more than welcome to smash the like button. Either 1 time, 3 times, any odd number of times is perfectly fine for me. So we have our basic form. So now, yeah, Raj, so I'm a lazy person, and some people will say I'm cheating. That's perfectly fine. I'm using GitHub Copilot. It's excellent. GitHub Copilot, for someone who can't type fast, is a lifesaver, because will use context of all the previous code you wrote in the application, and will use amazing AI, try to guess what you're going to type next. And if it's not in your code base, it's going to go on GitHub and figure out what's out there as well. Now, one thing that I will say, a lot of people say, GitHub Copilot's going to take your job. It's going to do... You still have to know the code it's recommending. Like, I will challenge anybody to take GitHub Copilot and just hit enter a bunch of times. Like, look, I'll actually show you this example here. Where am I here? Like, if I start randomly typing stuff here, function, and then I see what it recommends. Oops, let me go back here. Tab, and I'll just keep hitting tab, tab, tab. See, it'll just recommend random stuff. And again, if you're not sure what this does and what the code means, like, you're not going to get far. So Copilot is great to allow you to be more productive faster, but at the end, and maybe introduce some new ways of doing things that you didn't know, but you still have to understand what it's recommending. But yes, I'm using GitHub Copilot. Really awesome. I suggest everybody uses it. So anyway, we're good to go. So next thing we want to do is we're going to use Strapi. And since I already have Strapi running locally here, I could make a request to my endpoint here, and I'll show you which endpoint we're going to use. I'm going to go to settings, and basically we're building a form to allow us to do authentication. And so we have roles here. We have public. Why am I so zoomed in? The user permissions. And again, if you're not sure what this is, don't worry about it. Like I talk about Strapi more than enough that you will eventually be like, oh, Strapi is awesome. Strapi #1. And so we have our connect function, I believe. And if I click on it, no, it's not connect. Callback email, register, forgot password, register user, get permission. I'll show you where it is, because when in doubt, just go to documentation, guys. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing wrong with reading a bit of documentation. So you could find more documentation on Strapi, or you could find this amazing article called The Complete Guide to Authentication and Authorization with Strapi. And so you could read more about it, but I'm just going to say, trust me about it. Basically, you will make a request. They're using Axios, but we're going to use fetch, just because learn to use basic fetch, and that way I don't have to install Axios. But Axios is amazing. As you could see, the data that is required is our identifier and password. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this, right? And I'm going to go back to my code. And what I'm going to do is in my code, and I guess I'm going to have to put this in use effect, because this is going to be mutating the state or the data or like what have you. So I'm going to go into my use effect here. I know I copy and paste some stuff, but you know what? Sometimes when you copy and paste stuff, what am I doing? And see, like, did you see that recommendation? That's completely stupid. That's not what I need to do. You need to go inside here, and you need to put your thing inside here. So what we're going to do here is we're going to basically create a function, which is going to be, I should probably type async first. A sync function, which is going to try to think about it. Actually, we don't have to put it in here. And oh, by the way, here's like a great example of GitHub Copilot doing. I like that. I would use it if it wasn't sending all my code to GitHub servers. Yeah, and by the way, like if you're saving anything in public repositories in GitHub, it's already too late. But yeah, that's a good point. But I'm not afraid. I don't have to worry. So by the way, what happened? It disappeared again. Come on, let's try it again. So here's a great example where it recommends, and actually I'm not going to use this in useEffect. It's fine to do it without useEffect. But here's a great example where it recommends an implementation of using async await to use fetch to do something. And again, this is not the correct endpoint, but it's kind of recommending. And again, it would not be email and password, so this is not correct. But it's getting me halfway there based on the context of what I already wrote and what it's recommending. But I still need to know what this code does in order to make it useful. So let me go and kind of copy it here. useEffect, we're going to do something else here in useEffect. But for now, I'm going to go ahead in my, and like, you know, people say there's many ways to skin a cat. So I'm going to pass that example here, and I'm going to remove these brackets. We're going to make this whole function async, and we're going to wait for the response. The API that we want to hit based on our documentation that we're looking for, it's HTTP localhost auth here, and then we're gonna do this, and then I believe this is not enough because we have to pass our data because we're making a post request. We want to do header, which is going to be, this is going to be smart content type application JSON 100%, and then body JSON, and we're going to stringify our data that we're going to pass to it, which is going to be our data. We could just do data like this, and I'll show you where that's coming from if you guys still confused. And it's complaining now, and we could like remove this for a second. It's complaining now because this should be above. So let's kind of walk through this code here. So basically, when we fill out our form, we're going to save our data to state, which will be set here, email and password. And what we're doing is we're creating this data object, which is basically what we're going to pass into our post request, and it's going to map to what the API expects. It expects an identifier, which will be an email, and password, which will be the password. And then what it's going to do is going to use and fetch to make a post request, and we're going to pass our data. We could also test it via Postman, but I'm not going to do that because I'm too lazy to open. And then we could await our response from JSON. And basically for now, we're just going to console log our response. Did it work? Probably not. Like very randomly did not work. I'm just gonna guess. And what this should return, if everything is successful, it should return our JWT token and user. And so again, to reiterate, we are going to get our data from state. We're gonna use fetch to make a post request and pass this data into our API endpoint. And then if we are successful, we should get back the response data. And let me just call this response data so we're not too confused. Response data, whatever. And that should have the user and JWT token. So let me just kind of, before we try it out here, let me go back to my Strapi. I already have a user here. Let me see which I have. Coding after 30 at Gmail. I'm just going to make sure that the password is test user because I forgot what initial password I did. And this is what's cool about Strapi. It has authentication already built in, and it makes it very easy for you guys to set up an API. So moment of truth. I go to my React application. Let me refresh this. And so we have coding after 30. Password is test user. And then when I hit submit, So it says localhost 30% auth local is not allowed, method not allowed. That's interesting. Oh, I think because they changed some stuff. I may be wrong, but I believe it's supposed to be API auth local. Let's make that change, give it a try. And if that works, I'm going to have to complain about the documentation because you all saw what it said. But let's see here. Coding after 30 at Gmail, test user, submit, and boom. Look at that. We get our JWT token and our user. So where I said it did not work, I lied to you. It was going to work. See professionals here. So that's the basic implementation of how we are able to make an auth request via our form to an API to get back our token that will allow us to make authorized requests as our current user. And you could see that it's my coding after 30 user, first name, coding, last job title, YouTuber, and it's all coming from my API that I have set up with Strapi. So if you take a look here, look, I have the information coding, coding after 30, first name coding, last name 30, job title YouTuber, and that's pretty amazing. So what we did so far is we basically created a simple form, and we could delete this. And again, what you would do here, you would say, if response data exists, redirect me to logged in and set the JW2 token to either session storage or local storage. But we're not going to worry about that right now. We know everything works. That is fantastic. So what I want to do is basically go and do some quick refactors. And so notice here, one refactor we could do is we could take this and consolidate this, right? So instead of having it to be separate email and set email, password, set password, we could do something like this where we do const, look at this, random ass recommendation from Copilot. No, it's going to be form data, and then we're going to have set form data. And initially what we're going to do, we're going to pass here initial form state, right? And that could be basically what is the state of the form initially. And I'm going to delete this for now because we don't need it. And use effect we don't need because we're not doing anything after we log in for now, which is okay. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a const here called initial form state. And I know that we have our email. And right from the start, I'm going to call it identifier because I know that's what the API expects. I'm going to set it to blank, and then password, set it to blank. And that's not how you spell const, Paul. Const, initial state. And so now we have set form data. And what we could do is we could use this to set the state of our application. We have an object called identifier inside that state and password. So if you were to, we're going to come back to this in a second. And this would basically be coming now from form data dot identifier, and this will be coming from form data dot password. But we'll come back to that in a second. And once our application loads, basically what it's going to do, it's going to set our state to this initial state. So if I console log for data, it's going to contain two objects, identifier and password, and they're both going to be basically empty strings. And let's kind of go ahead here and console.log our form data. And we could put like state, whatever you want. And when we go to our application, email is not defined, said yes, obviously it's not defined. Let's fix this. So our value is not going to be email. We could destructure, but to kind of keep it more kind of like, you know, so you guys know where it's coming from. It's coming from form data at email. And instead of set email, what we're going to have here, we're going to have set form data. We're going to destructure the original state inside form data, and we're going to add email and set it to email target.value. Now you could do it this way, but that means that I would have to write something different here by doing form data password equals something. So instead, we're going to create a function called handle change, and that's what we're going to call instead. So here we're going to have handle change, and that's what we're going to call instead. And this is going to be form data dot password. And so we're going to make this smaller for now so it doesn't confuse us. And we're going to create a function called handle change. And what this is going to do is going to get the event. And basically they're recommending the structuring, so I'm going to do it. But basically what we're doing is we're taking out the values, and we're taking the name, and we're taking the value. And let me kind of put this on the same line here so it's easier to read. At least for me, it's easier to read in this case. And what this is going to do, for instance, if you see this field, it's called email, name called password. So basically get the name. If the name is email, it's going to set it as the key, and value will obviously be the value. And what we could do, we could console.log name and value, just so you guys could see. So now when I go to update my form, okay, there's something missing here. Okay, this is identifier because I changed it. That's why it's complaining. Identifier. Let's come back here. Refresh. Okay, so now let me delete this. So now if I type, look, Paul, oh, okay. So I believe the issue here that we're running into is we're constantly overriding state. What we want to do, I believe we want to use previous state, and we want to destructure previous state, and that's going to fix a problem we were having. So let's see here. And this, because we are calling a function, you got to have it in these brackets like so. And I think this is going to fix it, because before the way we were doing it, we were just overriding state completely. That's why it kept only letting me put one character. But now it should let me, no, nope, this works. I guess our previous example works. There was another problem. So let's check out what the problem is. So name and value. Let's see here. We're getting the target. So password works. So email doesn't work. Identifier. So coming back to our previous example, data and form data. Form data. So this should work now. I just want to make sure that whatever your object identifier is, right, or email or password, whatever we call it, that's what we're expecting to set our value. If the names don't match or the keys don't match, it's not going to work. And that was the issue we were having, not the one that I thought we were having. So now everything should work. So notice if I type the email works. If I type the password works. Now, one thing that the reason why you would want to do this way, and I could be wrong, and not saying this is, like React, there's multiple ways of doing things. This is also going to work. Let me just first, before I call myself a liar, try that. And so now, yeah, it still works. We're still getting the data. And the reason why I think this is better approach using previous state. And again, don't quote me on this. You guys could fact check me. But I think if you have a bunch of set states, like set form data, set other state, because it happens asynchronously, you don't guarantee what this is. But if you use previous state, you're always guaranteeing to use the previous state that was in. And so I kind of like this approach rather than the last approach I showed you. So that was the first refactor, is to put everything into one state instead of like two that we had before. And then I could delete this because this is not necessary. Like if you want it to be like, yeah, this is fine. Let's not worry about it. Now make sure like I handle submit. This looks good. This still looks good. So now in theory it should still work. It should still work. So let's go coding after 30. And we're going to go password test user. And if I click login, we should see JW token, and we should have a user info. So click submit, and look, it all worked. Our form was submitted. We get back our JW token, and we get a user ID and all the information here. So, but let me look at the comment. Raj, hey, that's awesome. I'm 35, learning React. Thank you for your motivation. So here's, not sure how much you follow my channel. Raj, I seriously started learning to code. Well, not seriously, on and off. I wish I was more motivated. So maybe this will be the best motivation for you. Go head first, and the fact that you're starting with React is amazing, because I feel it's the easiest way to get a job, even in today's market. And that's what I did eventually, and that's how I got my first job. I started learning to code at 35. Now, because I wasn't as motivated as you might be, I didn't get my first job until 39. So if you're starting now, within a year and a half, if you're really motivated, a year, you'll definitely be able to, if you do the right things, to get a job. Don't have to wait until you're 39. And put things in perspective, I'm about to be 42 years old, and so it's never too late. I got like 7 years on you, which is not saying it in any negative way, but what I'm saying is you're a perfect age to learn to code, to get a job, and do all the things you have to do. Just don't stop, keep at it. I just wanted to mention that to you. So what other refactor can we do? And so this idea in programming, don't repeat yourself, and it kind of seems like I'm repeating myself here a little bit. And now that I'm thinking about it, in this example, it's also going to feel like I'm repeating myself. But if you imagine that you have multiple places where you need to have an input, you could go ahead and create an input component. And so what we could do here, I'm just going to close stuff that's an eyesore for us. We know that works, so we could remove that console log, random form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. And so now what we could do is we could create a React component that we could reuse in multiple places instead of writing our input like we're doing here. And so for today, we're just going to do this as a final refactor and go from here. So I'm going to create a component called, let's call it text input. Why not? Instead of an input, because it'll be too confusing. And it's going to be a regular component, and it's going to return our input. And what we're going to do, instead of basically, having it hard-coded here, we're going to pass all those things as props, right? We're going to pass name, we're going to pass type. And again, for this example, it might seem like it's an overkill, but the placeholder, but it's not an overkill in a sense that if you are going to use this input in 1,000 places, right, you're only going to have to change the code in this one place where we're defining this component. So I'm not saying in this example it makes perfect sense, but imagine you're using this application in majority places, and so we want to do name, we want to do type, and then I'll show you why this is awesome in a second, why it's good to kind of take and create these React components to allow And then I'm going to pass rest. And basically rest, if I decide to pass any additional props, that will be passed down as rest. So now we have our text input component. And what I could do now is replace what I have here with my text input component. And in theory, it should all work. Now, the benefit of this is that if I want to make changes here, like I don't have to make changes in two different places. I could now make a change in one place. Before we get too far though, let me make sure that this works. Let me refresh here. Let's go coding after 30. Test user, click submit. And again, it still works. But what we just did, we took code that was being repeated and we placed it in a separate component. Now, so for whatever reason, if I wanted to add additional functionality, I guess I'm going to do a fragment here. No, I'm actually going to put it in a div. Hold on a second. I don't want to do... I want to do a div. And now what I could do is I could add a label, right? And then I could add the rest of the input. Where's my auto formatter? Right? And so now, just magically, I updated my component. Now, one thing I want to do, if there's no label prop, right? I don't want to show the label. Because if you're not passing the label, like why show the label? So what I'm going to go ahead here is do like a basic check, which will be if label, then show the label. And if there's no label, don't show the label. So now if we go to our form, we're going to see that there's no, let me refresh this. I broke something somewhere. No, I didn't break it. It's just because I need to make it bigger. So we have our two forms. We have our email here, and we have our password section. Notice because I didn't pass any labels, right? It's not showing the label. So now what I could go ahead is I could pass a label. And what I'm going to do, instead of passing a label everywhere, I'm like, oh, I only want label here because people are confused, you know, what this is. This is your email. And notice how now I have a reusable component. And let me refresh this because why is it identifier? Label, let me go back here. Oh, because, no, it's label. The label, what are you doing? We want to show the label. So now as you could see this is your email. And now I have a more flexible component. And now, number one, I don't have to repeat myself like I was repeating myself before. Now, if I want a label in this component, I pass it here. So notice how now we have a flexible text input that we could reuse many times. And like, you know, now like if you wanted additional input, you know, you could literally copy and paste this. And you could say, this is going to be, I don't know, what other inputs there are. Is there like a native phone input? I'm kind of curious now. I don't remember. HTML phone input. I don't know. So there is an input telephone type. No, I didn't even know that. I'm sure there is. There's so many bunch of types. It does take extra parameters, but we're not going to worry about it. But what I could do is I could do here telephone. It's a type tel, no placeholder. And then this would be, you know, telephone. And then I got to change this telephone. Actually, and so now we have another input. We have input for our telephone that only accepts that you could put your numbers in here. I was going to say I only accept numbers, but then it started letting me put labels. Again, don't worry about the styling, right? Don't worry about styling. It's all about functionality. But notice basically how we're able to now reuse components, and we could make all the changes that we need to now in this text input, and we can make this very flexible to allow us to, out of one function, create multiple types of input fields. And to me, that's super awesome. So with that being said, I think this kind of brings us to the end. And for now, I'm going to delete this. And we created this basic form. And just to kind of show you, we created a custom text input to allow us not to repeat ourselves. We have our initial form state. Instead of doing custom error handling, we just went with required. That will just do native HTML handling on input fields. We have our state. We handle the change. Whenever someone types a value in the input, we fire the handle change function, which will allow set the data to state. We have our submit function, which basically when we click our submit button, it's going to fire our form submit, right? Form submit here. When we click our submit type button, and it's going to fire this on submit event, and we're going to run this logic. Basically what we're doing is we're getting the data out of our state, we're passing it into our fetch post request, and once we get the data back, we get logged in. So with that super simple example, now understanding that, if you go to our original form, by the way, look how ugly this looks, and I just want to come back to this example. If you're not good at CSS, but you want to make a project that people will take seriously, you don't have to write your CSS from scratch. Now, what I want to show you here is, let me go here to my application here and close. Let me zoom out so you guys could see. Look how pretty this form works. So the functionality that I showed you guys earlier is the same, but notice because I'm using a template, it looks way prettier than our random form example that we just did. Like, see? And so what I want to say to you guys, definitely learn HTML and CSS, but if you're building a project that you want to make it look in your portfolio, don't be shy to basically, use a template. And so now we have this amazing login form where we could sign in into our application. We'll talk more about on the show how to do the rest of this stuff, but in today's show I want to focus more on using basic form to allow us to authenticate a user and to add and to log into our application. What I did is I showed you the original code that I wrote in our sign in form here. We went and we discussed all the logic that we need, and obviously if you look at this follows very similar pattern that I showed you in today's example, and except it just has some more custom error validations. And then we basically together worked on our random form example where I basically showed you a couple of ways to set up a basic form, and then I showed you a couple of common refactors that you guys can do. So with that being said, any questions, guys, let me know. And Luke, what's up? Luke, I just want to say that I love you so much, man, because I learned so much from our live stream, and one of the most important things I learned is how awesome Obsidian is. For those of you guys who don't know, Luke introduced me to this application called Obsidian, and it's an amazing note-taking application that allows you to take notes in MDX and save them to GitHub. And so I was working on some code, and I was like, man, I gotta save that stuff in my notes. And now what's cool, I could easily filter through these notes and find what I need, and I'm able to review the code. And to me, I realized that one of the coolest things, like Luke said on our podcast, if you guys didn't see it, check out last week's podcast. It's basically, I forgot what I called it, but it has Luke in it. It says Luke, his name, on the thumbnail. but there's a lot of gems on that show. And he was talking about recipes and patterns. And so what I did is, in the code that I wrote, I took some of the patterns that I was using and I put them in my notes. And what's awesome now, I have this one place where I could go ahead and look this stuff up. So if you're not using Obsidian to take notes, I don't know what you guys are doing. You guys should definitely do it. And so now, like, anything that I'm doing, I'm able to take the notes here and create notes. Now, one thing that I have an issue is it doesn't auto format stuff. So what I do is I just open this file in VS Code, and then I'll just do whatever, Shift F or what have you. But it's not a big deal. Like, notice how this file is not auto formatted. I mean, I could go ahead and do it manually like this, but what I've been doing is literally opening up, because that it's all basically saved in MDX format. And so I've been basically, you could open up in VS Code if you need to. And so this was I believe the deploy folder. I don't know if there's a better way of doing it, Luke. By the way, if there's a better way of doing it, let me know. But I'm just like, let me make this so you guys could see it. Like, notice how this is not formatted. So I just open it in VS Code, click Alt F, bam, easy peasy done if I have to do some additional stuff. But what's awesome, and here's the cool part about it, and I'll kind of show you in a second. This is something I was thinking about doing. So since this is in Markdown, and let me go back to Obsidian, and look, it's nicely formatted because it's in Markdown. What's awesome, you could parse Markdown into HTML. So you could literally take the notes that you like, and you could churn them into web pages or blog posts very easily. And what's awesome, well, I'll talk about it next stream, but Strapi supports Markdown out of the box. So you could literally save this to your GitHub and basically have a folder where you could have Strapi pull your notes, take your Markdown, change it into HTML, and well, not CSS you write yourself, but parse it to HTML, and you could have it dynamically generate your blog off the notes that you take. Like, obviously, the way I explain it, there's a few more steps in it, but with that being said, like, I think that's a cool idea. So that's like one amazing thing I learned from our podcast with Luke, guys. Guys, like, I know I've been chatting forever. Let me know if you guys finding these useful. I mean, I'm gonna keep doing these anyway because I love talking about code. The reason why, and here's the thing, guys. And on Saturday I do another show live at 9 p.m. Eastern time, is where I talk about soft skills required or tips that you could use to get hired as a developer. The reason why I do these live streams, I obviously don't make money off YouTube. It's actually takes a lot of my time for very little return monetary wise. But the reason why I do it is because it allows me to practice doing coding live under pressure and then talking about what I do. So every day I do this live stream, I'm practicing how to talk about my code. Imagine this, if I go to the interview, and I did this like hundreds of times already on this show, I have this level of confidence that I'm able to talk about my code that makes me look, maybe because I actually know what I'm doing, and be very comfortable. And so even if you don't want to have a YouTube channel, record yourself a bunch of times going through the process of talking to your code, or find a like a friend, find a friend, and sit next to them and explain to them what your code does. Because the more comfortable you get talking about your code base, the easier time you're going to have in interviews. And this is something I naturally, by accident, found out because I was doing these podcasts so much. And I was like, wait a second, whenever I go to interviews and I'm showing my code, I'm kind of comfortable talking about it. And I think it's because I've already been talking about it so much. you know. And so I can't state that enough. If you don't need to do a YouTube channel, and there are a lot of benefits of either writing short articles, like, right, don't do super long articles, and I'll show you a quick example in a second, and post it on LinkedIn, or make a video where you're explaining something you learn or explaining your code, put it on LinkedIn, because it does help to show two things. Number one, it shows that you're involved in the community because you're adding value and you're sharing what you've learned. And number two, it also shows that you know what you're talking about because you're talking about the things that you're learning. And so that's why I started with the YouTube originally, is to build authority as a developer. And I can't tell you how many doors it has opened for me being on YouTube. I can't stress that enough, by getting out in the community and sharing what I learned. And on LinkedIn, I had people look at some of the posts that I write and actually reach out to me as a recruiter. So there is some value. I'm not saying it's the only way of doing it, but there is definitely value in doing that. And Anna, thank you so much. And so, yeah, I have a blog. It's not even that done. And the reason why this blog has a lot of articles, number one, is because I have a lot of other things that I have to do which are higher on my priority. Number two, I'm more comfortable talking on the video than I am writing. But you know, if you create like an article similar to this one, like how to use fetch, filter, and render data in JavaScript, and you could basically do little article where you show your code examples and how to do it and share it on LinkedIn, I think it's very good. And here's the thing that I was saying. This is something that I wanted to say. Here's Obsidian, where you're able to take notes on Markdown, and because you push these notes to GitHub, you could create an API, or you even use Strapi to basically go to this repo, pull the notes that you like, and basically change them into HTML, and it'll be styled with the CSS on your website and automatically populate your blog. I think that's awesome. You know, so I didn't do that yet, but I think I'm going to do that. But, you know, writing and sharing stuff, I think it's very important, and I can't stress that enough. And very good point. I use Twitter and Matrix dev channels as my rubber duck to explain my code too, for similar reasons. 100%, and it's so important. So important. Many people think that just learning to code is the only thing you need to do, but there is this level of soft skills, being able to be a team player, understand how to work with other people, but more importantly, being able to explain what your code is doing verbally, because you're not going to be working in a silo. And so the more time you could spend talking about your code, explaining your code, the better you're going to be at it. It's just a fact. If you watch my earlier videos, because you guys look at me, like, I'm pretty dumb. Like, I'm just going to say it straight up. I'm not the smartest person in the world, but practice makes you better. And so since I started this YouTube channel and this is why I do these live streams, I don't care if I get embarrassed. I don't care if people make fun of me, but I do them just to get better at talking about code. And if you watch my previous stuff to where I am now, you're like, wow, this guy seems to be comfortable. It's a facade, but no, like, this guy seems to be comfortable. He knows what he's doing. And it's just because of practice, do the thing, talking. And the more you talk about the code, the more comfortable you're going to be able to do that on an interview. And there's a reason why people do mock interviews, because that's basically what they're doing. They're practicing talking at an interview, or solving a problem in an interview. So you could do a mock interview with your friends, you could do a mock interview by yourself, or you could do a mock interview or just share your code on the video. You don't even have to post it on YouTube, but you're getting that practice, you're getting that repetition. So with that being said, I think I'm gonna end the live stream here. And I didn't have music at all this whole live stream. And let me know if you guys like music or don't like music, because to me, it doesn't matter. I think maybe just talking without any interruptions from background music is actually a better experience. So let me know in the chat or the comments after. And if you guys have any questions before my voice explodes, let me know now. But otherwise, I will see you guys later, probably Saturday. And yeah, so I guess, I'm going to wait a little bit for some questions. But while you guys think of some questions before I go, I just want to say you guys are the best. I love the community that you guys have here. I'm so honored to be part of your community. You guys, like I keep saying, you guys are the building blocks that build this community. So without you guys, this channel would not exist. So I want to say thank you for that. And, I hope you guys are doing well wherever you guys are, staying safe. I know with all this stuff that's going on in the world, we can't pick and choose where we are born or what family we grow up to. So if we're lucky and have certain privileges because we live in different places, not saying that we have to be called out for it, but at least appreciate what you have and give the support when you can to others that need help. But with that being said, then if not too many people have questions, I want to say farewell to you guys. Really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. And I'll see you guys on Saturday. We're going to talk about some soft skills, interviewing, what I've learned, interviewing, and a bunch of other stuff, which is going to be fun. So good night and see you guys later.